Your chakras are the energy system that completely define who you are, and I did touch on this. So yes, the energy in your chakras is it. That's you. Everything else is a manifestation of you. And so what the energy in your chakras is absolutely vital. But you can't, the word I want to use is you can't cheat. What I mean is there's no quick fix to this. It's like you can't just have your chakras cleaned and then, what do you know? I'm much more enlightened. You know, there's no such thing as doing something to your chakras that you're not doing with your own consciousness. The whole practice of meditation, the whole practice of Kriya Yoga, everything is about refining, elevating, uplifting, liberating the energy in your chakras. So it's like if you want to be on the spiritual path, even if you don't know it, even if you've never heard the word chakra and have no idea what you're doing, you're shifting your energy pattern. And yes, you should shift your energy pattern. And yes, you should do everything you can to shift it in a harmonious and a wonderful way. As it happens, though, as I was saying before, there's no shortcut. There was a gentleman, a very good friend of mine. He lived in our community for 20 years. He lives elsewhere now, but he used to come to my classes. He was great. He would ask lots of really good questions. But after a while, I began to realize that there was a pattern to his questions. And no matter where he started or what he was asking, the actual question was, isn't there an easier way? You know, isn't there a shortcut that, like, if I keep asking you, you're going to tell me? So sometimes the idea that I'm going to do something to my chakras, and it's perfectly understandable because it's a valid principle. You know, can I go to a healer? Can I go to a chakra clearer? And sometimes those things are good. I have a very effective psychic friend, and she gifted me with a whole series of chakra treatments, and I lay on her bed, and we had St. John the Divine, the Brazilian healer. He cut all these crystals, and I lay on this bed, and we had all these crystals, and they went from chakra to chakra, and she walked around and played the little bells, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it all. And I think it, you know, gave me energy, but I also have to change myself. I also have to be disciplined. I also have to watch my attitudes. I also have to be kind. I also have to meditate. You know, all of that is much more effective, and there is no alternative to it. The simple question, do I have to clear the energy in my chakras? Yeah, you do. So then the next question is how? And that is the spiritual path. One of the things about the way these masters teach us is that the real way you clear your chakras is not by, you know, breaking the dam with one big punch. It's by gradually, okay, the chakras, I've mentioned the vrittis. It's like if you think of a river. I was going to say I grew up because I grew up at Ananda village. I became an adult person at Ananda village. We had the Yuba River. We go down to the river. River flows like this. All that water's heading for the sea, and it's determined to get to the sea. And some of the water gets deflected into whirlpools. And you can stand there and you can watch it. Some is heading for the sea, and some of it is just going to play over here, you know, and just going to keep doing this. And that's exactly what's going on with us. There's the fundamental flow of what is Kundalini energy, which is going by concentration into the divine light. And then we have these vrittis, which is, yes, I want God, but I also want to be a movie star. So I need to be beautiful, so I have to like look around for parents that are really pretty, that I can be born into, preferably in Los Angeles, you know. And then I have to, you know, have nice clothes, so they have to be rich, you know. And then I didn't quite make it as a movie star because I was too short, so I have to find taller parents. You know, this is the vritti. Yes, I want God, but I also want to be a movie star. And I also want to be rich, and I also want to have a nice home, and, you know, just the whole story. So some of us is flowing like the river to the sea, and some of us is spinning around in these other things that we need to find out if they're going to satisfy us, right? And there's lots of different ways to clear the chakras, which is to dissolve those vrittis and have all the water, all the energy flow to the sea. But the best way for those vrittis to be dissolved, now let's go back to the Yuba River. When the Yuba River is really flowing powerfully, the magnetic balance between the whirlpool and the flow of the river is such that the whirlpool just flows right into the river. So the best way to clear our chakras is to love God. Because the more we are focused on our deepest aspirations with devotion and power, those vrittis just disappear. Because the flow of energy upward toward the spirit becomes just, it's just metaphysics. It just becomes, I love God more than I love cigarettes and beer. Or, let's say, how about sexuality? It's not that it's bad, it's that I love this more. And that's how it really gets cleared. And that way of clearing it also is harmonious, because it's happening as a natural shift of our consciousness. And this is why you start to meditate, and in the weirdest way you change, and you don't even really know why. But what happened is the river was strong enough to start dissolving those vrittis. And your chakras are clean, just kind of automatically, as a consequence of the other work that you're doing. And you don't even know you've changed, except you might get happier. And then something will happen. I think I mentioned this morning. And you just respond differently. Because the vritti that caused you to respond that way has been absorbed into the river. So when that situation comes back to you, you don't respond that way anymore. Which is why everything, to touch back on the sexuality question, the more you lift your energy up in divine ways, serving others, loving others, giving to others, doing meditation practice, chanting, all these things, the more everything else takes care of itself. And sometimes, sometimes when those vrittis dissolve, they come in with a big bump, and it hits the river, and there's a rock and a couple of trees, and it all just goes kaboom for a while. The karma comes to the surface, and you have to live through it. Much of the time, you don't even know it. You just suddenly are different. The world is in a weird place. And all this technology is inspired by the cosmos. It's not coming from the devil. It's because the world is going to be united in higher ages. Space and time are eradicated first by technology and then by consciousness. Steve Jobs, who's personally responsible for a great deal of this, was profoundly and deeply connected to Paramahansa Yogananda. It's confusing, isn't it? Because simultaneously, that which is advancing our society is also dismantling it and destroying it. Either destroying our bodies or our nervous systems, our relationships with each other. So everything that's happening on the planet right now is a super mixed bag. And this is early Dwapara Yuga. This is early age of energy. That's what Dwapara Yuga is. Dwapara Yuga is a very insecure, chaotic yuga. And it's only the last 2,400 years, But it must have been a good idea for us to be here at this time. So we are also working out. What's happening right now is that man has the technological ability to blow the planet to pieces and lacks the moral fiber to not do it, right? That's exactly where we are. At the same time, these masters have descended, and in Autobiography of a Yogi, I knew the page number, but it's right up here on the right, and it says, Jesus and Babaji are very concerned about what's going on the planet right now. They're concerned about excessive materialism, racial hatred, religious bigotry, suicidal wars. They're very concerned about all of that. But they have planned the salvation of this age, which is to reunite us with Spirit. But these things happen. The whole story of Atlantis is a true story, of Atlantis becoming so technologically perverse that Mother Earth just ate the whole continent, right? And Mother Earth is going to do something similar to us again. She's quite annoyed. As Swami put it, she moves slowly, but once she starts, nothing can stop her. So yeah, that's all that's going on here. Now, I'm going to answer your question by answering more of what Uta asked me this morning about the Ukraine. And this is the same answer. The material expression of things is the last level of manifestation. Because we live in the material world and it's so easy to see, we can't help but think that this is the causative force. But everything in creation, and Swamiji had a wonderful way of just bringing things down to a very practical level. There's the causal world, there's the astral world, there's the material world. This is the causal world is the world of ideas. The astral world is the world of energy. The material world is this one here, okay? Everything that we do in our lives, it goes through those three stages, doesn't it? All of you are here because at some point you thought of coming here, didn't you? You thought of coming here, you put energy into that thought by finding out how to get here, how much it would cost, sending somebody money, registering, putting your body in some kind of a conveyance so that you could be here. Thought, energy, manifestation. Now, we see things manifesting, but before they manifest, they have gone through the causal, the astral, to get to the material plane. They're conscious beings on all of those levels, just as we have our politicians and prime ministers and spiritual teachers here. There are people, energy, individuals, jivas, on all those levels working with that energy. Some are devas, which are angelic beings. Some are asuras, which are darker beings. You have, it's all interplaying. If you really want to affect change, people think, well, I have to pick up the physical object and move it over here. No. Change is affected first with thought, first with ideas, then energy added to those ideas, then it's finally manifesting. When you're talking about a planet, and you're talking about a whole society, it's taken a long time for us to get to this point, and it's not going to get different just by saying, I don't like it. You know, I don't like it. I think it's icky. You know, I mean, how much energy is there in that? It took, a lot of people didn't think it was icky. They thought it was a really good idea. But if we really want to affect change, we start first by changing ourselves. And we put strong, clear thought behind where we want to go. We put energy behind that, and eventually it manifests. So all of you are here because you're trying, I'm trying, to change ourselves, and that's how the world is changed. But it doesn't change just like that. It changes very slowly. There's a very interesting, my friend wrote a little historical story. Paramahansa Yogananda said that in a previous incarnation he was William the Conqueror, and his spiritual advisor was Lanfranc, who was Sri Yukteswar. Okay, let's just take that as the given, whether that makes sense to you or not, but just take it for the conversation. Lanfranc, they were all Catholics at that time, and Lanfranc started the Cluny Monastery, somewhere in France. 12 monks. Okay? By the time, and my friend was tracing this out historically, 100 years later, 150 years later, from 12 monks, architecture, music, art of various forms, the liturgy of the church, farming methods, like all these things, all transformed, starting with 12 monks. Because 12 divided into this. But when they started, everything was pretty icky. But they, instead of just pointing out what was wrong, they started creating what was right. Thus, Ananda, for example, as a different way of doing things. When I went to India for the first time in 1986, the first time I'd been outside the Western world, and India was, in 86, was quite different than it is now. I looked at I'm in a 5-star hotel in Calcutta, and I'm on the 10th floor, and I can look down and I can see the family that lives on the sidewalk. And for the week that I was there, I could watch their life on the sidewalk. We have all the money, we have all the technology, we have all the resources to make this world a paradise. Gee, I wonder why we don't. It's because people don't want to. In other words, it's not a problem of anything but the human heart. So we have to start working on the human heart. And what is wrong? Why is the human heart so petty and mean and selfish? Because we all feel empty and want something and are trying to fill it with something. So people fill it with really wrong stuff. So we have to change consciousness. And I consider myself to be the most politically active person I know. I've spent my whole life trying to change people's consciousness. And as I said the first night I was here, consciousness has really changed. It's 50 years ago, now, at least in California. Not everyone meditates, but those who don't feel guilty about it. I mean, really, that is huge. So if you care, begin to think differently, act differently, and live differently. And it will change, because we're in an ascending age. But that's the only solution. If one responds to the negativity with fear or negativity, where is the solution going to come from? When there was this movement called Beyond War, it was, I think, an initiative in California to ban nuclear energy. These people came, they were very good at what they did. And they presented this, they wanted Ananda to back this political thing. So they presented to Swami this whole thing, and it was super well done, very smart, good people. And it was about, if a nuclear bomb falls on, I don't know, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Chicago, this many tens of thousands will be vaporized instantly. This many will turn into ash. You know, these people will be dead in an hour. You know, these will be maimed for 4 generations. It was very, very compelling. Swami listened quite politely. And then afterwards he said, you know, I commend what you're doing. I recognize the goodness that motivates you. He said, but if you're really trying to combat something negative, fear is not a good tactic. Because fear is the same vibration of what you're trying to combat. And that's what we have to be careful about, because it's all vibrations. And if you're trying to counter something that you think is dangerous with fear, anger, judgment, harshness, you can do some good. You can shift a few of the rocks around. But if you really want to change it, you have to change consciousness, which you cannot do unless you have changed your own. What you're actually asking is, why did God make it the way he made it? And there's a lot of tricky answers to that one. Vivekananda's answer is, the level of consciousness that asks the question cannot comprehend the answer. That's clever. That's clever. The other one is, you never understand God's point of view until you share his consciousness. Which is, I think that's good too, right? And the actual answer is like, I don't know. You know? If it were my plan, I would have made it different. But if it were my plan, we all wouldn't be sitting here, because it would just be over. There would be no story, no drama, no adventure, no opportunity to grow, no novels, no movies, no nothing. It's confusing, isn't it? And sometimes you just have to, like, who cares? In that book I have, Ask Asha. Let me think how this goes. I took on that question because somebody asked me that question, and I think of it like this. If you're in prison, and prison conditions are not very pleasant, and you have an opportunity to make, you know, to do certain things that makes your experience of being in prison less and less prison-like, it's really not important who put you in prison. And it's not even important whether you're guilty or innocent. The fact of the matter is, you're suffering. And if certain ways will make you suffer less and bring you more happiness, some questions are what we used to call interesting but not relevant. I remember when Shivani, she took a seclusion. I don't really remember what the context was, but she got a head of steam going. Shivani is my peer. She lives in Assisi, and she's a very marvelously feisty, strong-willed lady. And she came out of seclusion and she sort of marched up to Swamiji. She's not a very tall person. She's a mighty person, but she's not very tall. She walked up to Swami and she essentially said, "Why?" like that. Swami's answer was, "Shivani, what difference would it make?" Which is really a very, we like to play with these ideas, but what difference would it make? You could argue, think it should be this way, it should be that way. Sure, people entertain themselves doing that for a long time. There's a certain point where you just want your understanding to be practical. You're just not interested in spinning theories and talking ideas. I'm not happy today. How can I make myself happier? My life is not going the way I want it. How can I make it go the way I want it? And just these other questions you just put over here for now. And, accept the Master's answers. If I can merge back in God, then I'll understand. And here's the real key, though. Every saint, every master, every guru, every teacher says, it's all right. You think it's a stinky plan, but actually it's all right. It's going to come out all right. Not one of them says, it was a bum deal. They all say, you don't understand it now, but you will. And when you do, you won't mind anymore. So there is also comes a point where we become persuaded that we are connected to someone who knows. Paramhansa Yogananda, I had Swami Kriyananda. I knew that he knew. And you might have noticed, I have a pretty feisty mind. I'm not gullible and I don't like to take anybody's word for it. At the same time, Swami just had a way of being right when I gave his answers to me enough time. And I just began to realize that I didn't know everything. And that thank God, there were people who knew a lot more than me. And if I just followed their protocols for a while, I would begin to understand. So with a question like that, what would you do differently if you knew? And one can just fold one's arms and say, I don't like the way you're doing things, God. I refuse to cooperate. I'm not going to try to merge with God. I'm just going to sit here because I don't like your system. Sure, honey, go ahead, That's what people do all the time. And actually, tomorrow when you come, when we read the Festival of Light, it's called the Revolt. First, you come out and you're created in this world, you have a divine mission, you decide to not follow it, you just rebel. And you say, I want it to be different. Little children, this little girl I knew, she wanted to have chocolate cake for breakfast. And Mommy said, honey, you won't go up strong and healthy if you have chocolate cake for breakfast. And the little girl said, yes, I will. Infallible logic. Why did God make it like this? You shouldn't have made it like this. Oh, well, gee, I never thought of that. It's like you just self-declare. And then you come to the point where you start sincerely asking, what can I do? How can I serve? How can I expand? And the rest of it just doesn't matter anymore.